McLaren has firmly entered the fight with Red Bull for both the top spot in the Drivers' and the Constructors' Championship. But are they really ready to be top dog? Do they make the right decisions? Do they have the right drivers? Is this their year? Stick with us, turn one, as we go through and debate this topic. We're your hosts, Thomas.
And Jeremiah.
All right, Jeremiah, where do you want to kick us off with this discussion on McLaren?
So the conversation has to start with what we saw in Monza. In Monza, we saw Lando Norris in the first spot. We saw Oscar Piastri in the second spot, and then everybody else, who cares, behind him. But here's the problem. We have one driver in this fight on that team for the Drivers' Championship. That's Lando Norris. That's not Oscar Piastri. The problem is that Oscar is starting to we talked about this for a while now, since the beginning of last year. He is primed. He's slowly working his way to Lando's speed, and eventually we're going to have a battle of the ages between the two. Yeah, that can wait. That can wait for next year, as right now Oscar is nowhere in this fight, and they do have a driver in this fight for the championship. That's, once again, Lando Norris. So, reason I bring up Monza is because we see Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, 1 and 2, start of the race. Oscar Piastri passes Lando. Here's my problem with that. Once again, Oscar's not in the fight. And now you are allowing Lando to come to or bring a battle to Lando of Charles Leclerc, of a Max who eventually plans on catching up. You know, you have both Ferraris actually, because Carlos was up there as well. You can't have that. You have to have everything working for Lando in Lando's favor so that he can bring home this championship. Kind of like when Mercedes was winning all those races and it was Valtteri and Lewis, and then finally Max enters the scene. It was all hands on deck for Max, but also it was also all hands on deck for Lewis. You didn't see Valtteri really putting his name in the ring at all. He was playing the supportive role because they knew Lewis had a chance to still claim the drivers, but it was going to be a fight with Max. That's what we need to be seeing from Oscar Piastri, playing that secondary role, that supportive role, not allowing people to catch up to Lando, slowing them down in any way that he can, so that your points leader can take off into the sunset and get maximum points on the day.
Yeah, I think we should make a distinction here that I don't fault Oscar if he is out there allowed to race by the team going and trying to get points, because ultimately he's responsible for his own career, and all of these drivers they all have to be selfish to an extent. They all have to want to win and be champions and get points. I think the discussion is more focused on McLaren, the team, and the strategies that they're allowing these drivers to run with, and it seems very convoluted and not geared at winning a championship. Now, they still might, they've got a really good chance at winning the constructors, and they've got a half decent shot at winning the drivers. But, I'm going to go back to Austria, which was about the midpoint mark of the season, maybe one or two races before the midpoint part of the season. That's officially when Max kind of, I'm going to say fell off, but let's use that term loosely. That's when Max stopped winning races, was in Austria, that he got 5th place and he hasn't won a race since. That's also the same time that we saw Lando and Oscar really kick it into another gear and start gaining points and closing the gap on Ferrari at the time and Red Bull, who they passed Ferrari and now are gaining on Red Bull. You go 2 races ahead. So you go past Great Britain, you go to Hungary. McLaren makes their first, what I consider, major mistake of the season in dictating that Oscar Piastri win that race. Love Oscar, great kid, happy he got a race win, because before he'd only won a sprint race. He won a sprint race in his rookie season, like battling Max Verstappen, like crazy results, but he didn't get a Grand Prix win. So I'm happy that he got it, but at the same time, McLaren, Lando is the clear points leader. At that time, I mean, Lando was 60, 70, 80 points ahead of Oscar. You got to have Lando winning these races. This is not a year to play to the crowd or try to help a young driver's, ego or motivation or morale or whatever. You let Lando win, especially if he's in the first position for 60 laps of that 70-lap race. Then you come ahead to this past race down there in Monza in Italy. Almost the same deal, not quite, a little bit different scenario, but just freely allowing Oscar to pass Lando. Sure, you could argue Oscar was racing faster than Lando. Lando had fallen off a little bit. That doesn't matter because ultimately the results were still a Oscar Lando finish, whereas they should have kept the drivers where they were and had a Lando Oscar finish because every point matters when you're trying to make up what's his gap to Verstappen. You're trying to make up 62 points. Yeah, 5 points matters, 6 points matters, 10 points matters, 20 points matters. It all matters. Getting 1 point, if you can somehow finish in 10th and your other teammates in 11th, that matters at this point in the season if you're Lando Norris and McLaren. So the question is, are they ready to be top dog? I think they have the cars. I think they have the drivers. Their strategy is not fully there.
No, I want to bounce it back to whenever they allowed, I'm going to say that because it's the truth. They allowed Piastri to win that race. I want to bounce back to that race. And the reason why is because they came on the radio, on Lando's radio, and they said, we need Oscar to win this because we're going to need him if we're going to battle for the championship. Yeah, that's it. That's him gaining his token right there. And then in Monza, that's Lando cashing in the chip. Oscar, stay back, fight these guys off of me so that I can get a comfortable lead and we can really put some damage in this. Let's say Oscar slows down Charles Leclerc. Now Lando's able to build a nice gap. He's able to work out to where he can get that extra pit stop because McLaren did 2 pit stops and Ferrari just did the 1. So now you have a fight at the finish with Lando and Charles where Lando probably wins because he has that extra comfort of getting that extra pit stop in. But instead, Oscar passes him, Lando falls down the order, and now you have this scramble to see if Lando can get back up to the top. Right there, when Oscar won that race, that was Lando gaining his favor, and in Monza, that should have been Lando cashing in his favor. Right there. And they failed to do that. It's not like we have infinite races. We have, what? I want to say it's 9 now, 8 left? While you're looking
9 maybe? Yeah.
While you're looking that up. They need to be all hands on deck for Lando Norris right now. And I don't know if that's the case. It's like you said, their strategy's not in play, but maybe it's not necessarily strategy as much as it is leadership. I mean, I love Zach Brown and, you know, he's a heck of a personality, but right now he needs to be making the moves to prioritize Lando Norris if you want to have the tides turn to McLaren in this championship.
There's only 8 races left.
See, exactly. And right there, what did Lando finish? He finished like, what was it, 3rd?
Yeah, he got 3rd.
Yeah.
They had a 2-3.
That's points right there that could have easily gone Lando's way. If he wins first, he gets all of those extra points because I think he only gets, what is it? I think it's 12 for getting 3rd. Meanwhile, first
15, 18.
15, 18, right? Second's 18. So he got 15 in 3rd, and we see Charles Leclerc picking up that 25 points as he takes the win. Those are points. That's 10 points. 10 points. You said it's a 60-point gap. Or 62. It'd only be a 52 right now if Lando could have gotten that. And Max had a bad race that race. Red Bull in general could not figure out what was going on with their car in Monza. That right there was your opportunity to put the gap like to rest, to really close this deal and make it more of a fight.
You know, you touched on this a little bit, you know, flashing back to like the Lewis and Valtteri era when Max suddenly entered the scene. But there are times when you let your drivers fight, right? And so I'll run through a couple of those situations. An example that you would have let your drivers fight in Monza would have been if Lando either had an issue with his car or his pace was just so severely off that he was not going to finish in the top 3. He would have lost multiple positions, right? Like he would have finished well down in that race. However, his pace wasn't that bad. It was just a little bit slower, I guess, than Oscar because Oscar was able to get a legit pass. But he still finished 10 seconds ahead of Carlos Sainz. So it wasn't like he was at risk from drivers behind. So in that situation, if he was at risk from like falling down the grid, then sure, you get your one driver up to get the points. Cool. Another situation is if you do have the dominant car of the era and 2 dominant drivers, and you're pretty confident you're going to win every race or almost all the races, look at Lewis and Nico back in 2015, 2016, you let them race because it doesn't really matter.
And maybe that's the case for next year. Maybe next year
Right.
McLaren comes out, they're top dogs. Hey, Oscar and Lando are starting out on equal terms. They're both at 0. Let them duke it out. I'm all for that. But as it stands right now, you had Lando dominating for the first half of the season in comparison to Oscar. So now that they're kind of on equal terms and pace, you need to prioritize Lando.
Yeah, it's just too late in this. If this was race 4 or 5, okay, sure, maybe you could, have them race, but we've got 8 races left and you're behind. Again, they'll probably get the constructors. That's almost a given at this
Yeah.
point. Maybe Red Bull pulls something out, I don't know, and works magic, but it's almost a given McLaren's getting the constructors. But that drivers means a lot. I mean, it really does. It's one thing to build the best car and be labeled the best constructors, but to have the best driver, to me that is more. I feel like in F1 past, what F1 was built on was the constructors. That was more important. That's changed somewhere along the way. Maybe it changed with Schumacher or with Vettel or with Hamilton. It's changed recently, but the drivers now feels more important to the sport than the constructors does. I don't know when that flip happened.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue back in the McLaren days when it was Prost and Senna going at it with each other that the drivers meant everything. But at the end of the day, that
And look
that
at
year is known for its car and what it did.
the past couple of years that Red Bull has won, especially when Max won the first time. Just the sheer celebration they have for announcing their driver has won the world
Yeah, and they
championship.
lost the constructors, but you would have thought they didn't care at all.
They didn't, because the 2 years immediately following that, they dominated the constructors, won it with 7 races left in the season. They're like, woo, we got the constructors. But then like 3 races later, Max, you are world champion again. And it's a big party. So McLaren has a chance to do that. Again, they have the drivers. You've got a 1A and a 1B driver that can go get you the points that you need to win everything that you need. You just got to learn how to use them and put them in the right spots to get the right number of points. And it's a really good thing Lando got that fastest lap because, again, every point matters. So he
Right.
actually finished at 16 points, but he could have had 19 points. Or, like you said with the pit stop, 26
Yep,
points.
exactly. With that being said, I do want to segue to Ferrari. Do you have anything else you want to add about McLaren before we make this transition?
No, just let us know in the comments. I mean, what are y'all's thoughts on McLaren? Like, are we wrong in this? And somehow Oscar getting more points isn't a bad thing for the team. I don't understand that logic. So help us if we are wrong, because I don't know how we could be wrong.
I mean, whether Oscar finishes second, Lando finishes third, or Lando finishes second, Oscar finishes third, it's the same points for the team. So at that point, change the order, give it to Lando, let him take the battle to Max.
But please, somebody comment that we're so wrong on this and explain how. I want to know.
So I do want to talk about Ferrari. It's just a brief touch on the fact that they were able to win their home Grand Prix of Monza in Italy. And the reason why that's important is because, one, the celebration at the end was huge. I mean, you had the massive Ferrari banner that was being carried to the podium when they were singing the Italian anthem. Everybody was just screaming it and cheering. It was such a huge moment. It was so cool to see as a fan. Also, Charles Leclerc, he's not really in the talks for most important drivers of this year, but he's won the 2 that's mattered. He won his Grand Prix in Monaco, and he won Monza for the home Ferrari fans. That's a winning season by any means.
He's still sitting in third right now, and arguably he's got a decent shot of staying ahead of Piastri if he can get another race win or 2 over the next 8 races. He'll definitely stay ahead of Piastri.
Whether he finishes in third in the drivers or not, he had the two big moments, right? He got to jump into the bay in Monaco. He got to stand on the top spot of the podium while the Italian national anthem was playing and everybody was cheering for him and the champagne, and he's had by far the two biggest moments of the season. I mean, he might not have 8 race wins on the season or whatever, but man, those two wins were huge.
Well, in the last time a Ferrari driver won the Italian Grand Prix was Charles Leclerc in 2019. So it's been 5 years for the
Jeez.
folks of Italy to see their man back on the top of the podium.
I
And
mean,
you make a good point. I mean, okay, I know Charles had that really good year, 2022.
2021 when he was battling Max back and forth at the beginning of the
Yeah,
season.
whatever year he was battling Max. So it was a good year because he started out pretty hot. He had a couple race wins. Now, of course, Max took over as the season went on, but that was probably his best statistical year. But you're right in terms of just, emotions or, kind of like legacy. This might be his best year just because, again, you win your home Grand Prix that he has had so many struggles at
Oh
Monaco.
man.
I mean, he is probably the most tortured driver at Monaco currently on the grid. There's no getting around it. And so to go in and win that this year, and then to go out to Monza and win in front of the Tifosi, you're right, with the 2 or 3 massive, like you said, flags covering the entire crowd. They can't see anything. They don't know what's going on.
They don't care.
They're popping red and green smoke. They're just partying on the track. I mean, we talk about the atmosphere at the Netherlands and at Austria for Max. When Ferrari wins in Italy, it might be the best.
Oh yeah, and it's the best for any F1 fans too. I mean, you have I don't remember if it was Zach Brown, I think it was Toto that came on and said it doesn't matter if you're a Ferrari fan or not. To be a fan of F1 or something like that and see Ferrari win in Monza is a beautiful thing. I definitely quoted that wrong, but he said something along those lines, and he's 100% right. I mean, you don't have to be a Ferrari fan to respect and appreciate that moment that they got to share on that day.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's all that I do have for Ferrari. The next big point that I want to talk about is really what's going on with Red Bull. I don't think it's so much as the car is starting to be bad, because that's never the case. That doesn't make any sense at all. What it really means is that the rest of the teams are starting to pass them in the upgrades, and they're not doing anything about it. Now, here's why I think that is, and then you can give your opinion on it. I think all of the accidents that Sergio Perez has had on the year has cost Red Bull so much money that they can no longer invest in the upgrades to keep that Red Bull on top. I'm so serious too. I mean, while you're giving your rebuttal to that, I'm going to look up how much Sergio has cost Red Bull.
I don't. Other teams are catching Red Bull, and we saw this happen with Mercedes. That Mercedes dominated the turbo hybrid era when that first launched, and Lewis, of course, went on his run of winning 6 championships with them. And you saw towards the end of that, Red Bull caught up. And, in 2021, Max wins the drivers and, Mercedes wins the constructors. And then it was kind of the passing of the torch over to Red Bull. Maybe that's happening now. I also think that there is, what they say, where there's smoke, there's fire. And what have we heard all last year and all this year is that there's division within Red Bull about Christian Horner's leadership, about Helmut Marko and Max Verstappen, about Sergio Perez's contract, and about Newey. Newey's packing it up and leaving. I wonder, they fought through the initial reports that, oh, we're fine at Red Bull. There's no division. We're cool. We're good. No one dislikes anybody. I wonder if it's kind of all adding up to being true and really starting to weigh on those people. And they really are struggling at the Red Bull factory to put together a winning team, because these other teams have it figured out. These other teams have the upgrades. They have the teams. They have the buy-in. At Red Bull, it's, am I listening to Horner? Am I listening to Verstappen? Am I listening to Marco? Am I listening to Newey? Well, he's leaving this year. Why is Checo still here? Someone just sees him grabbing a cup of coffee. Like, what are you doing here, man?
No,
So
not Checo.
I wonder if that's really it. Like, I didn't buy into it for forever. I said for forever, any of the stories that came out about Red Bull, no, they're fine. They'll work it out. Their results say otherwise.
Sergio Perez, depending on which report you read, I've seen two now, has either cost the team, I'll give a range based on the two reports, somewhere between 3.97 million euros and 5 million euros. Now, they have a cap on how much that they could spend at the end of the year. And listen, they're not spending 80 million on team lunches this time. They're playing it a lot more safe this time. And I think when you take a 5 million euro hit, that hurts when you're trying to bring upgrades mid-season.
You know, this could also be the penalties that are biting them. They got their wind tunnel time and all that massively reduced. Remember from last year's
Was that
over
last year
cost cap thing?
that they
It
got
was.
that?
No, they got it for this year. The
Yeah,
penalty
no,
was
it
for
applies
this
for
year.
this year, but did they get it because of last year?
Yeah, so what I'm wondering is they go over the cost cap last year. They get slapped with a couple of sanctions and penalties. Red Bull, you already have the car developed. Like Red Bull had a really good car developed, but because of the lack of resources, which we thought wouldn't impact them at all, maybe it has. Maybe these other teams use that lack of resources for Red Bull to their advantage and played catch up.
It's possible. Whatever it is, the secret formula is no longer working, and they're going to have to find a new recipe quick.
Best case scenario for Red Bull, one, probably going to lose the constructors to McLaren just because, you know, Sergio just can't get enough points.
Yeah.
Whatever's going on with him, he just can't get enough points. Maybe they fix his setup next year and his car is fine and he can go back and get top 3 finishes again. But this year it ain't happening. Best case for them is that McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes steal tons of points from each other, you know, realistically, and that McLaren continues to botch their strategy. Don't you know Max is sitting there going, yeah, let Oscar pass. Let him through. Let's go, Oscar. Come on, man. The young kid.
Without a doubt.
So, again, that's best case scenario for them is that they maintain the drivers with Verstappen. They're probably going to lose the constructors, but they need the teams that are behind them, being right now McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, to just steal points from each other left and right. And they need Max to win some races in these last 8. He has not won a race since Spain. It's been 6 Grand Prix without a race win. When's the last time we said that about Max Verstappen?
Yeah, no, it's rough. It's nerve-wracking too, especially for Red Bull. I think, you know, the team's optimistic. If you ask Max and you ask Sergio, they've been nothing but optimistic, saying that the guys in the engineering in the factory, they're going to figure it out. And maybe that is the case. Maybe they figure out what it is. Maybe it's been a setup issue all along. Maybe this needs to be here instead. Maybe this has been, I don't know. I have no idea. I haven't studied any of that. But maybe they figure it out. Maybe Max is able to bring the fight back to at least the podium, because you said he hasn't won. He hasn't been consecutively on the podium. And so,
no, in those 6 races that he has not won, he's only gotten 2 second place finishes, no third place finishes. And those 2 second place finishes were separated by 2 races in between them. So it's massive. I mean, it's massive inconsistency, which again, for Red Bull, we haven't seen massive inconsistency since pre-2020.
Yeah.
Was the last time we saw inconsistency from Red Bull, 2018, 2019?
Yeah. The bottom line is that they need to get Max back into the fight for at least podiums. And like you said, they need McLaren to continue this weird battle between Oscar and Lando. Because best case scenario, let's say Oscar passes Lando and Lando's trying to fight Oscar. In doing that, burns up his tires. Max is sitting in third because Red Bull got him back on the podium. Max is able to chase down Lando and pass him. That creates more of a gap for Max in that driver standings. That's ideally the best situation if they can't get him back to winning races.
I don't think McLaren would get to this stage because they're not letting them freely race necessarily. They're not dogfighting. They'll let a guy get a pass. They're not stopping them, but it's not the old Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen dogfighting down straightaways bit. But if it got to that and those 2 guys take each other out in one of these last 8 races, I am firing everybody at McLaren. Everybody sitting on the pit wall at McLaren loses their job the day after those two guys crash out of a race.
Jeez.
Tell me I'm wrong.
I don't care how good of a car you built. We're not using it right. You're gone.
If you can build the best car. Ferrari 2022 had one of the best Formula One cars ever built. It was the fastest, the meanest, had a little bit of a porpoising problem. Don't worry about that.
And durability.
It exploded from time to time, but when that thing ran, it was beautiful. And they consistently gave their drivers the wrong strategy. They put them on the wrong tires. They got them penalties. They did pit stops differently from everybody else on the grid. They ran two different strategies. When there was a winning strategy, they could have had both drivers on. That's almost where McLaren is going to.
I hear you, and you're right. But I gotta bounce back to that comment. I'm sorry.
I had to fight through it.
They might have had a porpoising problem and their tire degradation was terrible and the car would catch on fire and they had to turn the engine down halfway through the season to stop it from exploding. But they built one of the best cars ever.
It really, like the first 6 races of the year before all that happened, it was the best car ever made.
Oh my gosh, that's great. I'm gonna segue off of this now. We've talked about Red Bull, their fall. They need to figure it out. I want to pay some homage to Sir Lewis Hamilton. He posted a tweet recently talking about how it was the last European race. He was no longer going to be in that engineering room. And it was a big emotional moment for him as he had the realization that his time at Mercedes is coming to an end. What a time, man. Like the whole Mercedes legacy of Lewis Hamilton. I mean, it completely rivals, if not surpasses, the Schumacher Ferrari saga. I mean, it's huge, man. It's been F1 for the past decade, more than that. I mean, he came to that team when they were not winning races and took them and won 6 drivers championships and 7 constructors championships.
Yes.
Yeah, because of Nico. Nico. So that is a heck of a time. We've got 8 races left for Lewis Hamilton to be at Mercedes. So appreciate it. It's coming to an end. Respect it for what it was and enjoy these last few races.
You know what's crazy about him, and I'll touch on this just briefly and we'll move on, but he was the driver that if you knew nothing about Formula One, you probably still knew the name Lewis Hamilton because you'd hear it mentioned on ESPN or SportsCenter, or you'd see him at the ESPYs, or they would announce like the world's best athletes, and he was the one on the list because he was the figurehead of Formula One. Like he was the dude for the longest. And before it got really popular over here in America, and there was an American following for Formula One, but really over the last 4 years, that's grown exponentially. He was the only recognizable, outside of Michael Schumacher from Formula One and Mario Andretti. I mean, that's kind of it. It was Lewis Hamilton. So, I bet him being at Monza he's going to be in that Ferrari next year, and he's probably thinking, I got to do a lot of PR events out here, don't I?
If he wins Monza in a Ferrari, dude,
he'll go down as a legend. I mean, he'll go down as a legend. But I'm trying to say, like, he'll be a legend to Italy, like, which he's currently not, outside of just being a great racer. Not to say that that's going to propel him to some other level of driver. But dude, if you bring those Italians any level of championship or wins at Monza, if y'all can pull out wins at Imola and Monza in the same year in a Ferrari, legendary.
Yeah. He's not going to go down as a legend now, but man, if he wins Monza in that Ferrari, he's going to go down as one of the greats, man.
It's the only points he gets the whole season. Jeez. But he's a legend.
Oh, man. I just wanted to pay a little respect to Lewis Hamilton. Like I said, 8 races left. Respect the time that he's been at Mercedes and appreciate these last few races as he makes this transition to Ferrari in 2025. It's going to be
he should hang it up. He's washed.
Jeez, I'm going to ignore that. We're going to go ahead and move on. I want to talk about the upcoming race. So in Monza, Magnussen got his final penalty points on his license, and he is out of that car. And who are they going to put in that car? Why, none other than 2025 driver Esteban Ocon. No, they're going to bring in Oliver Bearman. He's going to come, which is hilarious because he's still ahead of so many drivers right now in the driver standings based on his one race where he finished 7th in a Ferrari.
He's in 15th out of 22 total drivers have driven a Formula One car this year, and he's in 15th, ahead of 6 permanent F1 drivers.
Wouldn't it be amazing if he finished in 10th, picked up another point?
I mean, yeah, if he gets, so right now he's got 6 points. He's only 2 down from Pierre Gasly. He's only 6 down from Daniel Ricciardo. He's a good number away from Yuki, but he could work his way up at least 2 more spots and get into 13th pretty easily in one race.
Let's say something crazy happens. He finishes 9th. He finishes 8th. We saw it. We've seen it from Nico Hulkenberg. We know that the Haas can do it. I think that would be crazy. One, it would cause all kinds of excitement for the 2025 season at Haas. But two, him moving up in the driver standings in a season where he's only raced 2 races, his stock is going to go through the roof.
Which it already kind of is, but I'll be honest, I don't know why they're not just making this a permanent switch. You know you're not going with Magnussen in the future. Put this kid in the car for the rest of the season. Tell me I'm wrong. Fight me on that.
I just like watching Magnussen, and I'm going to appreciate the last 8 races with him.
No one likes watching. He's dangerous. He's dangerous and reckless, but not even in a fun way. It's like dangerous and reckless in a concerning way.
You don't know if he's going to put somebody in the wall or if he's going to make a safe and clean pass. What's going to happen?
He's crazy reckless. He's not the future of any teams. He's not getting a seat for next year. If you're Haas and Ferrari, put Bearman in the seat. I mean, at least Williams, said, okay, let's look around. Logan's not going to be here. Get him out of the seat. I don't know why more teams don't do this. If you know you're moving on from a guy at the end of the year and you have their replacement free and available and ready to go, put him in the car. Does he really care about doing F2 or whatever else he's doing right now?
He's got his spot in F1. He knows it's coming. He doesn't care about maybe he does. Maybe as a true-hearted racer, he cares about his finish in F2. But ultimately, he knows he's got his next seat lined up.
At Haas, in that same seat that he's racing in this coming weekend.
Yeah. So, regardless of your Magnussen hate, we can both agree that
hang on. If he podiums, he's getting the seat for the rest of the year.
If he podiums, he might get the Ferrari seat. They're either going to dump Charles Leclerc or Lewis Hamilton for that. If he podiums in a Haas, dude, what? Red Bull might pick him up. Bye, Sergio.
Old Fred Vasseur picks up on Charles. We love you, but this kid.
It's been a great run.
You're welcome to stick around in that Haas seat if you want it.
We can put you on the reserve driver staff.
Have you heard what Mick Schumacher's doing these days? No? Well, you're going to be doing whatever he's doing.
Just follow him around,
Poke him with a stick.
Oliver Bearman, I would love to see him finish 8th, 9th, or 10th just to get some extra points added on to his number. I think that'd be great, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see him back on the grid in a car that he's actually going to be in for next year, but also to see where he compares, because while the top teams are kind of flying away in the distance, and we don't know, McLaren's not on the same level as Mercedes. We don't know if Ferrari and Mercedes are better, who's better in that scenario. Red Bull is now somewhere down on that list. But in the back of the field, the RBs, the Haas's, the Alpines, I'm not going to say Kit because they're terrible, but all the other teams that I just listed, they're all on equal terms. So we're going to get to see how he fights with all these cars that are basically putting out the exact same performance.
So if Daniel Ricciardo fails to podium, if Bearman can get 7th place, he will tie Daniel Ricciardo. if he can get 6th place, he will move into the 13th spot on the grid, only racing twice.
If he can get 6th and a Haas, come on. You know what? There's a massive collision. The top 4 drivers are taken out. Maybe.
It's Baku, man. You've got turn 1, which is crazy. You've got the castle turn, which is crazy. Crazier things have happened.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to count it out, but on a realistic level, I would like to see him finish 10th, 9th, or 8th.
He'd be lucky to get 12th.
Yeah, well, in that hot. Jeez.
All right, you got anything else?
Yeah, my final topic, I just want to talk about Mercedes finally putting a ring on it as they pop the question to Antonelli, and he, of course, says, yes, 1,000 times yes. And he will now be partnering George Russell in 2025 in that Mercedes car.
It's going to be a really weird year next year. You've got Mercedes with no Lewis Hamilton and George Russell leading the team, which I guess, you know, in the back, I don't even know if that was in the back of my head because you just never thought of Lewis as leaving or you thought of George as leaving before Lewis. But now it's George leading a team with a rookie in a top seat, which has, you know, it's been a while since that happened. You usually work your way through the feeder system. Of course, we thought that it would be Kimi Antonelli. That's what everybody was saying, but it's just a crazy move to move a guy like that up to a top seat. But it'll be interesting to see the dynamic between him and George.
Yeah.
I, you know, clearly with Lewis there, you have an advantage. You look over at Red Bull, Max has the advantage. You look at Ferrari, they give preference to Charles, even though they're kind of on the same footing, him and Carlos. So what's the order at Mercedes? If Antonelli comes out and just, you know, beats George straight up 3 races in a row, is he the new guy?
Honestly, I don't think I would mind that if I'm being completely honest. I'm
excited that it's been a year of no change. This year there was nothing that happened in the drivers. Next year we have complete chaos with everybody switching teams, and it's going to be awesome.
I love it. I love every second of it. I can't wait to see what Antonelli comes out and does. Also, I'd like to point out, they let him loose in Monza in the car just to see what he did. Dude was pushing. His times, incredible. But he also wrecked the car. And then right after he wrecked the car, Toto Wolff was like, sign him.
He wrecked George Russell's car.
And he was not too happy about that. His future teammate.
It's not the way you want to start a relationship.
Also, we might see a whole different George Russell next year because he's going to be, because before he was trying to prove himself against Lewis Hamilton. We saw him as Mr. Consistency, and then the very next year we saw him pushing way too hard and going all over the place, but it's because he was trying to beat Lewis Hamilton constantly. This season we are seeing more of a surge of George beating Lewis Hamilton pretty regularly, and next year he's going to be fighting to keep his number 1 spot because is it going to go to Antonelli? Or is it going to stay as George Russell? And it's up to basically him.
He has to be the guy winning races at Mercedes because Toto, I mean, it's been years now since Toto's won anything. They're not going to wait much longer. You don't have a 4-year leash to get a drivers or constructors championship if you're Mercedes. So if George isn't the guy, you'll get replaced.
Yeah, no, they're just as ruthless as Red Bull was. I mean, they got a completely new lineup. Daniel Ricciardo left, and they were like, that's fine, we got the kid. And that's exactly what we could see with George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, because if Kimi Antonelli comes out and he's just insanely good, and George Russell and him are battling, maybe they're taking each other out, and George is like, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm going somewhere else. We could see Toto Wolff pulling the old Christian Horner and be like, yeah, that's fine, we got the kid.
Got the kid? Is that his nickname? The kid?
For now.
All right, I'm going to go back to the start of all of this, where we started with is McLaren ready for the top dog seat in the F1 world? Let us know in the comments. Are we just completely off with our assessment of McLaren's strategies? Dude, I've got to ask because I don't understand.
Yeah.
And no one's. All the articles that we've read, all the TV interviews, all the personalities that we've watched seem to agree with our logic, but McLaren has done this twice now, and it's very confusing. So let us know. Are we off base in our McLaren thoughts?
Guys, if you think that McLaren's cooking up a crazy strategy where they're going to have Lando take out Max in every single race for the rest of the season and have Oscar win outright, and he's going to win the Drivers' Championship? Whoa.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye, guys.